All right, so I want to first of all update you guys on what has been going on in recent years since the TV show Keeping Up with the Kaimanawas came out. I think I was 22 at the time, so 7 years has passed, which feels like a very long time. A huge amount has happened in those years, and for me the biggest development has been my involvement in terms of my horse training, in terms of my mental mindset and the way that I handle pressure. That on its own has completely transformed. It's unrecognizable compared to what it was. And I think 2014, which is when the TV show was filmed, I tamed my first wild horses. I tamed Hoff and Nikau. I had never tamed wild horses before this. Vicky and Kelly, my older sisters, they tamed wild horses in 2012. And so I kind of watched pieces of it, but I wasn't really interested in the horsemanship side of it because I got results without it. I was competing Viking, my Grand Prix pony, up to Grand Prix. I had one pony of the year. I'd then moved him up to a horse. I'd had great success at young rider level. So to me, the rope twirling and the communication was just like, it was extra work, and I was quite lazy at the time. And so, when you look at jumping, let's say, because that's what I primarily do, jumping is actually really easy. To ride a horse to a fence is very easy. Almost anyone can do it. It's teaching them the lateral work and understanding what they need from you and how much leg they need and how they need to use their bodies in order to stay strong so they last as long as possible. It's reading their mental state and what they need in order to stay happy. All that stuff, it didn't even cross my mind. I was too ignorant at the time. In 2015, with these two wild horses, I had this romantic vision in my head of how it was going to go. I was going to get these horses, we were going to bond, they were going to do incredible things, and in reality that didn't go to plan at all.
Candy, you can't just be everywhere at once. Either I hold the face or you hold the face.
Wait. Ow, you hit me with your hand. Nikau. Don't back me up. Be awesome. Oh shit. What am I supposed to do? It's like a psycho there. No.
Nikau's become a mad-ass bucking bronco.
Why is he doing that?
We gotta go forward and follow.
I don't understand what I did wrong. I was way in over my head. I shouldn't have got two mature stallions for the experience I had. I'd started plenty of horses. I've been starting horses since I was 15. I've worked with lots of unhandled horses, but I was just very ignorant in how to read horses' body language and really what a stallion needs, because I didn't understand trauma. I didn't understand how they mentally process stress. And so many times I was putting pressure on, not realizing that I'd shut the horse down or that I was worrying them. And so that was a big wake-up call for me. And I went in there with all this egotistical bravado. I very quickly got pushed back down to where I needed to be, and I got a big wake-up call. And I actually, through that experience of working with those two horses, I lost a huge amount of confidence, to the point where I couldn't even handle young horses without panicking. And because I had a lot of fear, I was getting frustrated with the horses as my way of protecting myself. Anger, frustration, resentment, those sort of emotions are the body trying to look after itself, to protect itself, because it thinks it's going to get hurt. And at the time, I just thought it was the horse's problem. I was thinking, oh, if they shouldn't be running over me, they shouldn't be doing this. I didn't realize that the issue existed within me. And so it's taken a while to come to the stage where, one, I am aware that the problem is mine, and two, on how to fix it, because they're two very different things. And so after that, we had this opportunity. It was the year the TV series came out, to go to America and tame wild Mustangs. And so I went there with no confidence at all. I got this really beautiful mare called Spring, and the journey in America was life-changing. You take yourself out of your comfort zone, you will change as a person, regardless of what you do. You will absolutely, it will transform you. And the more you take yourself out of your comfort zone, the more it will transform you. And so that was the beginning stage of my want to grow as a horse person. In the beginning, working with Spring, I was so bad in my timing. I was in her face, I was hassling her, I was using pressure and release very wrong. And then as we went through that American journey, I unfortunately had to send Spring back to the BLM yard. She had a damaged sesamoid bone, and I had her swapped out for a young Mustang called Deacon, who was born in captivity. He had never been touched or handled, but he was so friendly, way too friendly, a little bit bolshy. But within, I think, a week, we had him riding out on massive, big, million-acre parks, and he was just cool. He was so cool. This boy is 3 years old. He's like a little 5-year-old boy. He's got ADHD. Everything's all new and exciting, and his concentration span's pretty short. But he's very cool. He's having a massive tantrum. He's about to lie down. What are you? What is it doing? But it wasn't until I was in Wyoming and we just happened to pass Turtle Ranch, which is where they train the Clydesdales for the Budweiser commercials. And very cheekily we popped in, and the people there were just incredible. They were very welcoming, and they showed us a few performances or demonstrations on their training, because they were preparing these two Clydesdales for a commercial where one would kick a soccer ball into a net and the other one would guard it. And that was the whole concept of this commercial. And when we got there, the main trainer, he was teaching a horse how to kick a ball around. And I remember watching him, and I couldn't believe it. You know, this guy he didn't touch the horse. He was so beautiful with his timing and his pressure and release. And the horse, it just looked like they were just having a conversation the whole time. The guy would use a cue, the horse would look over at him and be like, what did you mean? And this guy would just make a small movement and the horse would be like, yep, gotcha. And then the horse, within 20 minutes, was starting to paw at this ball. Now the trainer invited us back the next day, and we watched the second session, and within 20 minutes he had this horse kicking this ball around this yard.
Good. Good. Good girl. All right, go up. Turn. 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 Come. Good girl. Come around. Good. Wait. Come around. Come. I'm going to have her do it on the outside and do it on the near side. Steady. Good. Okay. Now we do the near side. Come on. Good. Good. Okay. Good girl. Whoa. Come here.
And the horse was so relaxed, and it just picked up on what the trainer was saying so fast, and I just couldn't believe it. That was the moment that completely changed everything for me, and it inspired me so much. And that's where the vision to improve my horsemanship came about. It was just it was a seed being planted. It hadn't started to grow yet, but it was getting there. And so I came back from America, and I think in 2016 we went across to tame wild brumbies. So this was a year later. I got a really beautiful little brumby called Ballarat. My horsemanship was still terrible. My timing was not great. My confidence was still terrible, but I had started the journey. So I'd covered a bit of ground. There was still a huge way to go between where I am now and where I was, but I'd started the journey. And so because I had now had this vision of I want to be able to communicate with my horses better, I want to be the best trainer I can be for my horse, it meant that I became more open-minded. And so I started to watch little clips here and there of horse training, and it started to interest me, whereas before it was boring. because it didn't benefit me in any way, because I wasn't going anywhere. It wasn't going to be a part of my journey. But now that I had this vision of having better horsemanship, it completely changed the trajectory of where I was going. And so the Brumbies went good. I gave my Brumby lots of amazing experiences, but I was still lacking horsemanship to a major degree. I probably couldn't have asked her to lunge around me in a circle. That's how basic my horsemanship was. But I could ride her and I could jump little fences, and she was sweet and kind and ready to move on to a younger rider by the time I finished with her at Equitana in Melbourne. And then in 2016, my older sister Vicky was scouted to compete at Road to the Horse. And I didn't even know what Road to the Horse was at the time. I remember very vaguely a lady coming to our house with this DVD. I must have been 12 or 13 at the time. And we sat down in the lounge and we watched some trainers competing, and I think Pat Pirelli was one of those trainers. I vaguely remember, because they used to sit down and watch lots of Pat Pirelli videos. And because she had been asked to compete, we decided we wanted to go over and support Vicky and watch the competition. And it was in 2017 when we got there that my whole world completely changed. I watched this event. It was so inspiring. There were 4 women who had to break in a colt in 3 days. I think they probably had just less than 4 hours of training time. And then on the 3rd day, they had to perform one of the gnarliest obstacles I'd ever seen. And I walked away from that event completely spellbound by it, and so inspired and ready to advance my horsemanship even more. And my sister took home the title that year and was invited back to compete the following year, and this time she was competing against current world champions. And that to watch was even more profound. It completely opened my eyes to this whole new level of training. And I remember going up to the organizer and shaking her hand, and I said, I'm going to compete at this event in the next 5 years. Now, my training was shocking at that stage. And so it was a very bold agreement. But I went home from that event and I thought, okay, I'm going to learn everything I can, because I probably have wanted lots of things as much, because there's lots of things I want, but it's one of the things I want more than anything. I want to compete in an event like that because it was just extraordinary. And so over the course of 5 years, I tamed a few more wild horses and started to learn bits and pieces. I started to advance further down that track of becoming a better horsewoman. And then I also, at a similar time, I got into the human trauma world. And I started learning about how humans process stress, which correlated over to how horses process stress. And I got actually invited to compete at Road to the Horse, I think slightly after 5 years, maybe 5.5 years. But I got to compete at the Wild Card Competition. So it's not the World Championships, but it's like if you win the Wild Card Competition, you automatically get a position in the Road to the Horse Championship. And I found that out, I must have found it out at the start of 2022. And so that was like a massive shake-up, because I'm like, oh my gosh, I've been working really, really hard to get here. I didn't think I was going to get in so soon. And now I'm here and I need to be here to compete at Road to the Horse. And so I had to learn faster than I have ever learned before. I was studying night and day. I was working on my youngsters and trying different things and trying to find that pattern that worked, that the horses understood, that was the simplest form that I could ask them, and that was just fair on the animal. And I don't know, this is something I do find quite often, is that the bigger the vision you have, the more obstacles just come your way. It's just like the universe is looking at you and saying, oh honey, sweetheart, you're going to have to learn a whole lot if you want to reach there. And so then it just chucks everything at you. And suddenly you're facing major failures. And like I was dealing with some of the most difficult horses I'd ever worked with. Even a month in my lead up to Road to the Horse, I was just like, what is going on? I probably had half a dozen horses that were just so difficult, and it was making me doubt myself. I was thinking, am I ready for this? But I'd done all this trauma work, so I just worked through it and I released all these fears, and I finally got to Road to the Horse, and it was one of the coolest things I have ever done in my life, and it was actually a major confidence booster. I did not win the event. I came 5th. My colt to me was quite difficult. On the first day, it took me 45 minutes to catch, and he was just scared. So the second I moved towards him, you could just see him freezing up. And my training philosophy is I don't want to push a horse into the freeze response, because when it comes out of the freeze response, it's going into a fight and flight. I want them in their thinking brain. So I had to work with him in a different way, a new concept that I've been working on over the last year. And it took me 45 minutes the first day to catch him. Second day, it took me 2 minutes. We had a bit of a tricky situation on day 2 because he froze up on the left rein, and I just had to quietly work him through it. And just at the end of the round, I could just feel him starting to come out the other side. And I went home back to our hotel, and I said to Kelly, I just don't know what he's going to do tomorrow, because I feel like we had an amazing win. Probably wasn't that obvious maybe to the audience because it looked like we went backwards, but we just continued laying down that foundation. And I said to Kelly, I know he's going to come round. I just don't know if he's going to come round on day 3, day 4, or day 5. Well, I got in there on day 3. I got in the round yard, caught him straight away, had him lunging out beautifully, got my forward movement, jumped on his back. I had 20 minutes in there to get him ready to ride out onto the obstacle course and to do the reining work. And he blew me away. He was incredible. He'd never been ridden outside the round yard. He'd had less than 4 hours of training over the whole event, and he was just such a good boy. He got through all 12 obstacles. He was just so light and responsive. I was so proud of him. Actually, I just happened upon that pattern literally in the days leading up to that event, because I was still changing and tweaking. And I tried this new method, which I had not tried before. And I came away going, oh my gosh, I have it. And obviously there were still flaws in the program. There were still areas I needed to address. But I've come home from America, and I have never had such good results with my horses. I have never trained in such a simple, easy way that the horses just get straight away. And I finally feel like I know what I'm doing. Whereas before I was, saying to the horse, 5 times 6 minus 8 times thing equals whatever, and the horse was just like, I don't know what you're wanting. They'd get confused, and then I'd get frustrated, and there would be this conflict. Whereas now I'm like, okay, 4 plus 5, and the horse says, I don't understand that. So I'm like, okay. And then I break it down a little simpler, and the horse goes, oh yeah, I get that. And then we just evolve or advance a little bit further, and suddenly within a session or two, they're like, boom, got it. And that has been the coolest thing ever that I could have ever taken away from this event, was how much it pushed me outside of my comfort zone to learn and to grow and to throw aside everything that I thought I knew and to be so open-minded to everything. I watched as many trainers as possible. I asked advice from so many different people. I went and watched trainers training. I asked them questions. I took down notes. I tried snippets here and there, and I really put myself out there, and which is quite a vulnerable thing to do, because as a previous World Cup rider, I'd been on this TV show, we'd had a bit of publicity for different things here or there. To admit that I didn't know what I was doing is a big deal, because I could have easily gone, well, I'm a World Cup show jumper, obviously I'm good enough, and that's it. But I knew if I did that, then when I was 40 years old, I would be no different than who I am today. And I didn't want that. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to do whatever it takes to learn as much as I can, because I want to always evolve. My goal and my definition of success is that I'm slightly better than I was yesterday. And so to have the results I'm having now is insane. It is everything I have ever dreamed of and a million times more. And of course there are still things that I have to address. There's still times where instinct kicks in and the horse will do something and my body will react before my mind does. And those moments are annoying, because I'm like, damn, I've done all this work. I'm really working on softness and been so patient and understanding, and I've just come in and used too much pressure and told the horse off, and that's not how I want to train. So then I have to go back to the drawing board and say, okay, what do I need to fix? What do I need to change here? And it's just about being so flexible and open-minded and being willing to evolve. And so I'm really excited, because if I've made this much change in a short number of years, I imagine what I could do in the next few years. And it's a really cool journey. It's worth everything, all the hard work, all the failures, all the disappointments, worth it a million times over. And so I will be sharing lots of wee bit of what I have learnt in coming videos, which will be really cool.